Okay, I can't have this meeting. I'm going to call them after I start this. Welcome, everyone, to the March 26th Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission meeting, especially to all of you who are here on spring break. Much appreciated. On the agenda today, we'll have items of interest from commissioners, followed by the director's report. On the consent agenda is consideration of the minutes from our March 12th PSC meeting. That will then be followed by the Willamette River Greenway Inventory Update, which is a hearing and recommendation. And that will be followed by the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project briefing. You guys go ahead if you got any items of interest while I try to dial. Nobody's going to talk? Eric, you going to? Got anything to join in?
Is that on? Okay. Perfect. I just had one thing for the director's report, which is you should have in front of you the next iteration of the Better Housing by Design report. And so that's your reading assignment over the rest of spring break, is to be prepared for that discussion at your next meeting.
Oh, there it is. Great. Thank you. Anything? See if we can reconnect with Eli. Well, it wasn't for a moment there anyway. So we can hear you now. It's great.
Okay.
Can you hear us or me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay. So we've read through the agenda, and now we are going to get started with the consent agenda. Sorry.
The consent agenda, Madam Chair.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. That has been approved. Next item on the agenda is the Willamette River Greenway Inventory Update. This is a hearing and a recommendation. If you are here to testify, please fill out a testimony card there on the side of the room and bring it up to Julie. And we are limiting testimony to 2 minutes.
Wrong project. I'm in the wrong. There we go. Thank you. Great. Good evening, Commissioners. Debbie Bischoff, Bureau Planning and Sustainability, Senior Planner. Tonight's discussion will be on the Willamette River Greenway inventory, and this is the document we'll be talking about this evening. So before I start, I just wanted to acknowledge the staff that have been involved in development of this, but in particular our GIS, our mapping staff, and our graphic staff, because they do exceptional work, and I think this document's a great example. So I just want to say kudos to Carmen Pekarsky and Krista Gust. So what I will do first is give you a little bit of a project overview about the Willamette River Greenway inventory. It was first completed in 1986 with an update in 2014. This inventory is very limited to what is specified in the statewide Planning Goal 15, which is Willamette River Greenway. For those of you who may not be familiar with statewide Planning Goal 15, the goal itself is to protect, conserve, enhance, and maintain the natural, scenic, historical, agricultural, economic, and recreation qualities of lands along the Willamette River. This planning goal requires jurisdictions along the Willamette to establish a greenway boundary, complete an inventory, and apply regulations to properties for development within the boundary that meet this statewide planning goal. The city completed its work for the Willamette Greenway Plan in 1986. In recent years, planning staff has been working to update the Willamette Greenway Plan by reach, and you can see on On the screen, we have 3 reaches. Plans for the Central Reach were updated in 2018 with the Central City 2035 plan. Currently, planning staff is working to develop a plan for the South Reach, and you'll be reviewing the River Plan South Reach in October of this year. So the inventory that's before you tonight informs the South Reach work along with other planning information. And because this is an inventory only, there are no changes to policies, plans, or regulations. So just a quick little bit on the process. So we developed this proposed draft of the inventory in February. We sent notices to over 5,000 property owners and others interested in the topic about an open house and this hearing. We communicated this project through our River Plan News, which is an electronic newsletter, and through the project webpage. And on March 6th, we held an open house on the inventory, and 15 people attended. So the inventory is made up of maps and data, and these are the topics that are reflected in the inventory as per statewide planning goal 15. So we have land uses, base and overlay zones, ownership, natural resource characteristics, recreation, and historic cultural resources. Most of the data comes from our geographic information system data. There's also county and other data sources reflected in this inventory. The 2 notable changes to the inventory reflect the Central Reach, and again with the Central City Plan, there have been changes to zoning, overlay zones, and scenic and natural resources. Changes elsewhere in the Willamette River Greenway boundary reflect new zones that were applied through the 2035 Comprehensive Plan. Before I get to the amendments, I just wanted to share with you a few tidbits of information in the inventory. So as I mentioned, there's 3 unique reaches along the Willamette River in our city. The Working Harbor North Reach, most of the properties are zoned industrial or employment, and that's 1,950 out of 2,200 acres. The downtown Central Reach area, including South Waterfront, is mostly zoned for mixed-use urban development, and that's 190 out of 230 acres. And the South Reach, known for its parks, open spaces, and natural areas, has 400 acres out of 655 zoned open space. Within the Willamette River Greenway boundary, there are 1,000 acres of vegetation, with a large amount of it, 424 acres, in forested lands. The Willamette River, like the Columbia River and adjacent lands, have long been of cultural importance to Native Americans for hunting, gathering, transportation, and commerce for thousands of years. A 2005 predictive modeling study concluded that there were likely Native American settlements along the Willamette River in the North Reach. Native Americans also, they used the Willamette River to travel by canoes to Willamette Falls for trading with other Native Americans and for fishing. So overall, again, this inventory is a snapshot of existing conditions. Okay, so planning staff has identified a few minor amendments to make to the proposed draft inventory. These suggested changes were brought up by staff, planning commissioners, and staff at the Oregon State Marine Board. I'm not going to read this all. You have in your memo, today's memo, March 26th, the amendments, and they are on the screen here. And so I would just like to conclude that planning staff requests that the PSC receive testimony tonight, consider these and other amendments, and make motions to accept the amendments and to forward the Willamette River Greenway Inventory recommended draft as amended to City Council for consideration and final action. I am here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Yeah, just a sec, Mike. Thank you, Debbie. Commissioner Smith reminded me that I should probably disclose that I do own property on the Willamette River. And at this point, since this is an inventory, do not feel there's any conflict of interest with me participating in voting today. And I see Mike wanted to.
Well, yeah, I have a comment, not a question. I was involved in I thought it was 84, but 1986 inventory with a couple staffers from the Bureau. And I would say, based on the fact that at that time we were walking around with paper maps, that I would concur that the GIS work that's been done here has improved the information in the database dramatically since 1986, and I'm really impressed. I've gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, and I think staff has done a fabulous job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I think since we don't see anything, I'll go ahead and start receiving testimony. Thank you, Debbie. So we have one individual here to testify. If there's anybody else here to testify, please go ahead and fill a card over the side of the room and bring them up to Julie. At the moment, if Roger Gertenrich could come up, that'd be appreciated.
So this has to be on, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, it's on.
Welcome.
Yeah, my name is Roger Gertenrich. I live in the Meriwether Towers. Have been on the Central Greenway Committee and also a member of the North Reach Greenway Committee, and I'm a former mayor of the city of Salem. I've come to the Planning Commission several times over the last 10 years talking about the historic value of the river, and the river is the most significant thing on that inventory. The river has been used for hundreds of years for all sorts of reasons. We're still using it for all sorts of reasons, but we really don't respect it the way we ought to. There's not a single sign on the entire stretch of that river that says that it's a Willamette River. So if you come from another country, you don't know what river that is. And the history of the river is being lost. If you ask the young people, young adults, for example, what Kaiser Permanente is, they'll tell you it's a health organization. They have no idea of the history that it built with hundreds and hundreds of ships there, right? So 10 years ago, I started with others an effort to put the history out on that river. And Park and Rec kept saying no until I had 33 letters of support from major organizations and all sorts of people like Vera Katz and Norma Paulus and Michael Powell, things like that. And then they said, okay, I give up. And the vote on the North Reach Committee was unanimous to have outdoor maritime displays along the pedestrian river of the North Greenway. So that recommendation will be going to the City Council, and I hope you folks will add your blessing to it as well, because history is important. It kind of dovetails with those outdoor displays that are over on OMSI, and it'll be a destination point for a lot of people to bring their children to. And along with the displays, outdoor displays, will be, I hope, cutouts of the original residents of the river, the eagle, right, the heron, the beaver, things like that. And I have a photo of an example of the kind of thing that we would like to see added as well. So it's been a 10-year project for me, and it's finally got to the point where I got a vote. Not easy to get through Park and Rec with their hoops that you have to go through, but even the designers were glad that content is going to be put out on that river. And I look forward to seeing that happen when the Zidell Corporation ever gets off a spot and gets that Greenway done. So I'm hoping it was just an information item for you. It's a project that wants to be completed. It's a project that I think you'll all be proud of when you see happening. And by the way, it's not going to be paid for by the city. We've got all of the people that have the history to fund it, like Kaiser and the Working Waterfront Coalition. The bigger items that we couldn't fit on the Greenway, like the smokestacks of the Battleship Oregon and the anchor, they just didn't fit. I've got working with the Oregon Maritime Museum right now to locate those items along adjacent to the mast of the ship and the Tom McCall Riverfront Park. And in that, we have Everett International willing to move the items. We have engineers willing to design the stands that hold it. We've got a welding class out at the Swan Island ready to build the stands. So the idea is to have this thing done by the people and not necessarily very much by the taxpayer. So hopefully someday you'll all go down there and see the history put out in the river, and people will learn more about the river and give that river the respect that it's earned. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for your leadership.
Yeah,
Are there any questions? Go ahead, Teresa.
Not a question, but it's beautiful, the design. Thank you.
Yes, yes. I think you'll all be proud of it. Formations out in Gresham is the one that we contacted to do those outdoor displays. And we haven't, obviously, that's not been picked yet. I would like the city to have a sort of an introduction as you get into that Greenway, telling you what they're going to see. And they may have to put out a few dollars for that. But other than that, it shouldn't be much. Thank you.
And perhaps if we could get our fellow commissioners to pass around the information. I think it's stalled somewhere. Thank you. Appreciate it. If there is anybody else here to testify, I am not seeing anybody getting up to fill out a card. So with that, we will close testimony. Are there any additional questions for Debbie from anyone? If not, anybody care to make a motion?
Yes, I would.
And then, do you want to see the cheat sheet on how to do it?
Way to wing it.
Well, Debbie was so nice to help us out.
Yeah. Well, the motion is to accept the amendments that we've reviewed to the Willamette River Greenway inventory and to forward the Willamette River Greenway inventory as amended to City Council as the PSC's recommended draft for consideration and final action.
Thank you for making the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions, deliberations? Okay, not seeing any. Julie, let's take the roll.
Okay. Backrack?
Yes.
Bordolazzo?
Yes.
Hauk?
Yes.
Larcell?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Spivak?
And
Yeah. St. Martin? Yes. Schultz?
yes, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Great. I just would like for those watching or the meeting, we have a tentative city council date on the Willamette River Greenway inventory for May 30th at 2 p.m.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project, and this is a briefing. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Caitlin Ruff. I'm with the City of Portland Bureau of Transportation. I'm Major Projects and Partnerships Project Manager and the PBOT Project Manager on the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project, which we are here to brief you on today. And I'll let Mauricio and Megan do a quick introduction.
It's the button, right?
There you go.
Hello, I'm Mauricio de Clark. I'm a supervising planner with the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
And I'm Megan Channel with ODOT here in Region 1, and I'm the Rose Quarter Program Manager.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So we are excited to be here at the Planning and Sustainability Commission today, and we're looking forward to the discussion and your input. I know this is not the first time the Commission has heard of this project or from this project, but it has also been some time. So we're here today to provide you with an update in terms of where the project is, an overview of the project elements as they stand today, and we will also go through some of the planning history in terms of how we got to where we are. The project is currently in the environmental stage, and that's why we are here right now. The City of Portland has been working with ODOT on briefings to all public commissions to ensure that you have the opportunity to hear from the project and participate in the environmental stage public comment period if you choose to do so. So the public comment period is a point that provides opportunity to comment on the technical information that is within the environmental assessment. Megan's going to provide much more information about what that means and what is included. Just some additional context, the IFAV Rose Quarter Improvement Project is really an important project of local, regional, and actually also statewide significance. It includes transportation elements that affect and can benefit how everyone, and that's really all modes, travel through and importantly to the Rose Quarter area. And as we know, this part of North and Northeast Portland is an important part of our central city as a predominant event center and transportation hub, but it also includes a really rather tragic history in terms of community displacement and disenfranchisement that has resulted in an area that has become isolated from the rest of Portland and leaves really only a few relatively uncomfortable ways to cross the highway. So as a partner on the project, the City of Portland has been working with ODOT to engage the community and gain input on how to leverage this project to really create local street connections that both facilitate the significant transit and transportation demands in the area and can support community benefits and redevelopment opportunities. We are going to, as I mentioned, go through a bit of the planning history with Mauricio. We will share a project overview video that's about 5 minutes long that will give you some better orientation into the area and the project elements. We'll review the project purpose and need and the environmental assessment in terms of the methodology and key findings, review the public involvement to date, and then end in looking at how to engage and public engagement opportunities going forward. Quickly, I want to mention that, as I had said, the project lead is ODOT. The city, as a partner, PBOT is leading the city's engagement. We're working with a number of bureaus, more than are listed here, and this, I'm sure, will only expand as the project moves forward. Also wanted to mention a few of the key stakeholders, not all of which are mentioned here, but some of the regional agencies such as Metro and TriMet, as well as landowners, Moda Center, and Portland Public Schools. The project also includes specific commitments to engage the communities that were originally disadvantaged by the construction of I-5. And there is also the Albina Vision Trust, which I know the PSC has recently received a briefing from, and is really an important community-driven vision for the area. I also just wanted to mention that we're aware, I know the PSC has seen some of the EA comment letters as they've been coming in, and some of those letters from city advisory committees. We're hoping to address a number of those comments or issues kind of throughout the presentation today, and then we are also working with ODOT to work with those groups and ensure collaboration kind of going forward and into design. Some of the key project milestones, I think Megan will go through a more detailed project schedule later in the presentation, but I just wanted to call attention to these high-level timeframes in terms of the environmental assessment comment period, which is active right now. It has been open since February 15th and closes on April 1st. Following that, there will be a NEPA decision document this spring, and then there's the planned design stage that comes immediately following that, which would include an urban design component and a lot of opportunities in terms of working with partners and other public groups looking at how this design comes together, what the community interactions will be, how certain areas are programmed. And so we'll touch on that a bit more. And then also calling your attention to the directive in House Bill 2017 that ODOT has to provide a cost-to-complete report by early 2020. And that's really mentioned because as the environmental stage is wrapping up, a lot of the design work that needs to take place will be done to help inform that cost-to-complete report. So there's a lot of design that is forthcoming. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Mauricio to do a bit of the planning history.
All right, can you hear me? So Mauricio the clerk, I was there in 2010 when the city, Portland, and ODOT got together to see if they can do something better about this area. We had done a lot worse in this area in the 60s. As you can see the picture, and Caitlin already mentioned the impacts. You can see the building of I-84, the building by I-5, thank you, the Memorial Coliseum, and then the Emmanuel Hospital. So a lot of interventions that really decimated what was once a vibrant city, African-American city of Albina. So that's always been in the city's framework of how to improve the area. However, we also have the issue that we have two major freeways running through it. So this is what it was before the major improvements. You can see the grid pattern, and you can see kind of an interesting pattern along the water there. And today, technology, you see a lot of super blocks, including Long District and the arenas. So a lot of change. An idea that we've always had is, can we get some of that back, some of that connectivity that we lost, among other things. So we were doing, the city, we were engaging in the update of the Central City Plan, and we decided after the framework plan to do a quadrant. This was the first one, Northeast Quadrant. And as we looked at what to do, what could we do, we looked at obviously the freeway as, so to speak, the big elephant in the room. How can we improve the area without really addressing the freeway impacts? So that led to conversations with ODOT as to what could we do something together? Is there something that we can do that actually benefits the network, the freeway network, the regional, state, and national network, as well as we improve the area that we're working on? And we engaged in a long conversation to see what would that look like, and what would a planning process look like, and what are the things that were acceptable and not. Here you see a picture of an inventory that we commissioned, Bureau of Planning at the time, and Sustainability, to identify the historic resources, many of them African-American resources, and we made a commitment to, as we work on the design, that we would not further affect this inventory, which was so lost. You can kind of see to outside of the study area, all that red means old, and then white is basically has been replaced. So we did a lot of history. There's a lot of important buildings, like the left bank building, which has a history with the jazz music history of the in Portland. Also nationally, you can see there Louis Armstrong. So a lot of assets that we had that are underutilized because it's surrounded by this freeway that affects the local system. So at the same time, acknowledging, that's the part of the city, that this is part of a regional network. This area, the Rose Quarter area, it's an interchange that funnels I-5, I-84, which actually terminates here, I-405, and Highway 30. So it all has to converge in two lanes, in a very narrow space by design. 2 lanes cross under Broadway and Wilder with no shoulders, so if there's a crash, there's nowhere to pull over. And we see delays through much of the day. It also provides access to the Lower Albina area and directly to the northwest, and the Motor Center Lloyd District in North and Northeast neighborhoods. It's also one of the major freight bottlenecks in the country. So the answer was that with some preliminary analysis, there was things that we could do that would benefit the city and the regional system, ODOT system. So, but then, and we could do better than this project. This is the project that was in the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, as the thing to do. A very expensive project that significantly expanded the freeway with a flyover, removed local crossings, further distorted the street network that was replaced in the 60s, and a lot of loss of sidewalks and bicycle connections. So that was the starting point. That's what we were stuck for many decades trying to, this is what the regionals wanted to do. We were saying, no, that's not going to work for us. Can we do something better? Let's explore it via this plan. So we got busy. We got a large committee of 30 people, and we developed actually a plan, a land use and urban design plan with a strong transportation component and a freeway facility plan all together. They're not divorced, they come together. So that's important to consider as you look at what's within the project that you see later today. So those two projects have been adopted by council, by the Oregon Transportation Commission, and Metro, so they're part of the regional transportation plan. We formed a large committee. We met 19 times. Overall, we had 85 community meetings. Here's a summary over about 2 years. About 3,000 people participated directly. And we ended up with something that we think is a project that improves the regional network, the local network, and also provides the growth and the urban design framework for Lloyd District and the Rose Quarter to thrive. We're expecting about 8,000 new housing units and 9,000 jobs in the next few decades. And this plan and this project helps frame and reweave the two sides of I-5 in a way that we haven't done before. And in a way that actually wasn't even contemplated in our plans. As you'll see, the idea of lids, the idea of replacing 5 bridges with new infrastructure, that wasn't even in our city plans at the time. A key component to consider is that there was a lot of lack of connectivity, particularly east-west. The areas in orange, you'll see that there's lack of connectivity. And we were trying to address that, and as you'll see in the final design, we have connections to the south of Broadway-Weiler and to the north of Broadway-Weiler. Again, we're trying to creating that redundancy that a grid used to provide, and now we wanted to provide again. Furthermore, since the plan was adopted, we went through this Vision Zero plan at City of Portland, and Broadway was identified. We knew this at the time. It was a very dangerous place, particularly for cyclists, and we heard that a lot during the planning process. And it's actually the number one bicycle in terms of high crashes, and number one is particularly the Rose Quarter is the most dangerous part of Broadway, and this project addresses some of those physical constraints that the area has. So it helps to meet many of our project city goals, including connectivity, placemaking, densification, and safety. So just to compare the old design, the Greeley-Banfield project, with the new, you'll see that, I tried to put them as best as I could side by side. One, it's a lot smaller footprint, fewer lanes, actually one auxiliary lane in each direction. A lot more crossings. You'll see one on to the north, refer as Hancock-Dixon, and one to the south, the Clackamas crossing that you're gonna see later. But notice that the old design would basically rerouted Vancouver and Williams and the other streets into frontage roads. Basically, became almost part of the freeway. And the new design preserved as best as we could the grid that we have and the functionality of these major collectors, as well as introduce new connections to the north and the south, and a lid, two lids that can provide a lot of benefits to the project, including, again, trying to bridge the psychological gap that we have when we go over the freeway, and as well as potentially provide some good uses on them. And we'll talk more about that, I think. So just in summary, the old Greeley-Banfield was replaced with a much smaller project from a freeway perspective, still providing the safety benefit that we think we need, and I think the report on the EA confirms that, but also significantly less costly and much better for the local network, much better than we've ever had in any plan. So it's a compromise, but it's a compromise that it has been very good. It has a great potential to be very good for the city of Portland. One of the key ideas was to create a network around this area, which we call the box. The box is basically where all the traffic funnels from I-5 and from Lloyd District is basically Broadway and Weiler, going east-west, and Vancouver-Williams. So by providing some redundancy to the north with this Hancock-Dixon connection, and to the south for pedestrians and cyclists via a new bridge, Clackamas, you were able to bypass the box, which is so constrained. Everything goes through it, and create this urban design space that you can go around it, quieter and alternatives. So that's important also because it provided a new connection to the Lower Albina, which now kind of lacks it. Flint goes straight across the freeway to Broadway. So that we were, by providing a new connection to the north, opened up a new road to serve Lower Albina and this PPS, the Blanchard site, which is one of the three, I think, maybe another one, master plan sites in the central city. So there's a lot is expected out of that site in the next 20 years. And this plan was helping that by providing greater access, as well as greater access to Lower Albina. So these are some of the big ideas that we were discussing at the time and were translated into the final design. And you can see basically, this is actually a drawing from the time, lids between Broadway and Wilder, and one to the north. Why a lid? It's good for many reasons, but also it helped with the construction of the project. All the bridges are tied together and they come at an angle. And we have the east-west, north-south grid, but the freeway is cutting diagonally. So it's all kind of tangled together. It's a lot easier to just replace it in place. Also, in the freeway, you have pillars that are over the bridges, so that you couldn't really expand it unless you take everything out. So this created a great opportunity to do it together. So the new design, as you see, has new bicycle facilities, new sidewalk spaces, and 5 new bridges, more resilient, and lids that can provide a lot of benefit moving forward. I'm trying to move very quickly because a lot of you have seen this before, but I think half of you are new. So. And also that this helped, with the support the land use vision, the transportation findings, and also this multimodal mixed use area designation, which is basically it's a new designation that allows areas that meet the requirement of density to continue to densify and develop without having this imposition from the state that you need to watch out for congestion on freeways, so which has slowed down development of other downtowns through Oregon. So this is a special clause in the books now that allows cities of high density areas to not have to address these mobility standards that other places on cities. However, to do that though, you need a concurrence. You need from ODOT, and safety must be addressed. So this project addresses the safety component of this area of the Lloyd District. Therefore, with other projects in the central city, we were able to get concurrence from ODOT that the whole central city is an MMA designated area. So that should help the city grow and densify with less red tape and less, more organically, so to speak. As new land use applications come in, changes of zoning and so forth. So I think that terminates my very quick 2-year summary. Thanks. Thank you.
All right, so picking up from that robust planning process, we are now in the environmental review phase, as Caitlin said, picking up with the recommended design concept from the planning phase. And we just released a environmental assessment in February, and the 45-day public comment period is closing on April 1st. And that document is really looking at the impacts and benefits of the recommended design concept from the planning phase that Mauricio just spoke about. And so I'll get into the details of some of the key environmental assessment findings, but just wanted to highlight the timeline. While this project has been a number of years in the making and we have done robust community engagement, there's still a lot of work to be done. The design is still very preliminary, with the design phase really kicking off this spring and would carry through 2022, with construction starting as early as 2023. And through that process, we remain committed to continuing to engage the community and be broad and inclusive in that engagement as the project moves forward.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
Just to help. So when you say it's very preliminary design, do you have certain phases that you call your design work?
We do have certain phases. At this point, the project is about at a 5% design level.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the project area today. You can see I-5 running north-south through the center here. It carries about 120,000 vehicles per day. You can see the Broadway-Wilder corridor running east-west, which Mauricio mentioned is part of the city's high crash corridor network for people driving, biking, and walking. Couple that with Vancouver and Williams, which run north and south through here, is one of the city's busiest bicycle networks, with over 5,000 people biking each day during the peak period. There's also high-frequency transit traveling on Vancouver and Williams as well. You've got TriMet with their bus service on Vancouver Williams, and Max through Rose Quarter Transit. And then couple that with a Blazer game or a Winterhawks game at one of the entertainment facilities. And that's all to say that there's a number of individuals and people using this area. And so as we look to address improvements in this area, we're looking at ways where we can better connect rather than deepening the divides that were created in the past. So this is the purpose and need of the project. Mauricio hit on a lot of these points, but the project is driven by a significant need on our transportation system with congestion issues on I-5. Again, this portion of I-5 carries some of the highest traffic volumes in the state. And, this area serves not only the city of Portland, but the region, state, and West Coast as the interstate connection between Mexico and Canada, and is a significant portion of the freight network. Yet it does see about 12 hours of congestion each day. And this congestion is recognized as a statewide issue, and it affects the reliable movement of people and freight, which then affects our economy in the area. There's also frequent crashes on I-5. This segment of I-5 through the Rose Quarter sees some of the highest crash rate in the state of Oregon. It's about 3.5 times higher than other urban interstates throughout the state. And within this 1 mile segment...
Megan, if I could interrupt.
Sure.
How does that crash rate compare to the urban arterials that ODOT manages in the region?
So crash rates are compared facility by facility, and so the 3.5 times is comparing to urban interstate facilities. I don't have the numbers to be able to compare.
Isn't it correct that crashes on ODOT's arterials are significantly higher, and particularly the fatalities and serious injuries are much higher on the arterials?
This area of I-5, the primary crashes that we do see on this segment of I-5 are rear end and sideswipe collisions. But that said, it is still the highest crash rate in the state of Oregon. And with not having shoulders in this area, when there is a crash on I-5, there's no place for the drivers to move out, the drivers to move out safely of traffic. And so that then further compounds the congestion with only having 2 lanes in each direction. There's also difficult highway transitions with 3 interstates coming together, closely spaced interchanges, and a complex interchange configuration, which then also further compound the safety and operational issues in this area. And as Caitlin alluded to with House Bill 2017, these needs were really recognized at a statewide level. And so our state legislature, through House Bill 2017, has provided funding and direction to move forward and address these needs in the Rose Quarter area. There's also a number of local needs, which I'll turn to Caitlin to address as well.
Thank you, Megan. So yeah, in terms of the purpose and need, I think Megan and Mauricio have kind of already hit on the intensity of local street uses and active transit through this area. I think that is further complicated when there's limited alternatives and ways to cross the freeway. So in current conditions, this area is classified as a pedestrian district. Williams and Vancouver is the city's busiest bikeway today and classified as a major city bikeway. And facilities through that interchange area are relatively substandard, and so that also impacts safe access to transit. Yep.
All right. So this image just shows the number of project elements. The key piece here is that there are elements that relate to the highway, there are elements that relate to the local street system, and all of these elements help support the future land use vision of what can happen around in the Rose Quarter area. So I'm going to flip to a project video that will show each of these project elements in a little bit more detail. Caitlin, are you able to?
I don't have any controls.
Let's see.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
there you go.
Do we have sound? Do you know?
Do you know if the sound is turned on?
Pull you out of the presentation, actually.
The keyboard.
Sorry.
Thanks for bearing with us.
It's always the tricky part, the videos.
We tried to get fancy.
has worked
We were
before.
doing so well.
We were doing so well.
Still doing well.
Okay. You might want to.
I think they did.
Okay. I don't know how loud it's gonna get.
Okay. When we've done it before, it's been at like 50. I don't know if that.
Well, yeah, but it's not.
Oh. Oh, okay. All right.
Is it music or narration?
Narration.
The I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project was created by the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Oh, no.
It is her voice. No.
The I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project was created by the Oregon Department of Transportation and the City of Portland, with input from the community to plan the transportation future of Inner North and Northeast Portland. The project will improve both local streets and I-5 in the Rose Quarter area, support economic growth, and result in a more reliable, safer, and better connected community. The project will improve safety and operations on I-5 by adding continuous 12-foot shoulders and a new ramp-to-ramp lane in both directions of the highway between I-84 and I-405. The ramp-to-ramp lanes will give drivers more time and space to merge, reducing frequent crashes and congestion points, ultimately saving over 2.5 million hours of travel time a year. The project provides new connections across I-5. The first is a new path over I-5 for people walking, biking, and rolling from the Northeast Clackamas Street area to the Rose Quarter, creating a safer, more comfortable way to get around. The crossing will be a key part of the city's Green Loop, improving bike and pedestrian access between the Willamette River, the Rose Quarter, and the Lloyd District. The new replacement bridges over I-5 will be in the form of highway covers. These covers will provide space for wider sidewalks, protected bike lanes, and opportunities for new community spaces. The project team will work with the local community to determine how the new space on top of the covers can become the best asset for the neighborhood. The project will introduce a number of safety-related improvements for bicycles and pedestrians. Here is a closer look at a concept for the Williams-Weidler multi-use path. When the project is complete, Williams Avenue between Weidler and Ramsey will be exclusive to buses, cyclists, and pedestrians. A new 36-foot wide multi-use path along Williams Avenue will provide separation from vehicles for cyclists and pedestrians moving through the interchange. It will also reduce bicycle-pedestrian conflicts with the existing I-5 South on-ramp at Weidler. The project team will work with the community as elements of the path are designed, including the space between bicycles and pedestrians. These improvements enhance key connections in the local street network, address Portland's Vision Zero safety priorities, and make the area more accessible to people who walk, bike, roll, or access transit. One of the new highway covers will span I-5 and connect Vancouver Avenue with a new road that links North Hancock to North Dixon. The existing Flint Street Bridge will be removed, and North Flint will end at Northeast Tillamook Street on the north side of I-5. The Hancock-Dixon crossing and multi-use path will provide a new direct connection between the north and northeast neighborhoods and Lower Albina. The crossing will provide an alternative to the Broadway and Weidler intersections at Vancouver and Williams. Below, at the highway level, you can again see the new ramp-to-ramp lanes that will allow drivers more space to merge or eliminate the need to merge for the roughly 99% of drivers who use this segment of I-5 for local connections. The reduction of traffic weaving on I-5 is expected to significantly reduce crash rates and improve travel times during the busiest times of the day. As we turn and head south, you can see a driver's view on I-5. Here, you can see the ramp-to-ramp lane that connects I-405 to I-84 and experience traveling under the highway covers. The I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project is an opportunity to create community connections. The project seeks to strengthen the area as a highly accessible and multimodal hub for moving people and goods. For example, improvements at the Broadway-Weidler interchange, which sees over 5,000 bikers a day, will improve safety and enhance the biker-commuter experience. Improvements on I-5 will allow freight trucks to move more smoothly through the area, getting to their destinations quicker. And the transportation improvements will act as a catalyst for future redevelopment, including high-density development that includes employment and affordable housing that is consistent with current city plans. ODOT and the City of Portland are planning for an improved Rose Quarter area where people walking, biking, and rolling can comfortably cross a bridge over I-5 that is designed just for them, where cars and freight trucks on I-5 have more space and time to merge while traveling through the area, and where getting from the Broadway Bridge to the Lloyd District is easier for all. We encourage you to join us in the ongoing community conversations. Get involved and provide your input at i5rosequarter.org.
All right. So through this process, we've kind of building again from the great work that was done during the planning phase, we've held a number of community engagement opportunities and working with the community as we were evaluating the environmental effects of the project with over 50 outreach events held between 2017 and 2018. But before we kicked off the environmental phase and this work and understanding the well-documented history of the project area, we took an intentional approach to ensure that we were reaching communities of color and low-income populations as part of this. And before kicking off the environmental review phase, myself and our community affairs manager at the time, Shelley Romero, conducted interviews with members of the African American community to better learn about the project area history, get input on what they saw as an effective and meaningful process moving forward that we could then use to shape our process and the project to create a broad and inclusive engagement process. And through that, we documented what we heard as part of those interviews. And so referenced on the slide here is the environmental justice interview summary that you can find on the Rose Quarter Project website. And that's to say a lot of the information that we heard through those interviews really helped form our program of outreach moving forward. So based on what we heard, we established a community liaisons committee that was working with us throughout the environmental review phase and helping us work through project outreach, public involvement processes, messages to make sure that what we were developing would resonate with the broader community. And that committee was comprised of over or half of the community was comprised of communities of color, representing communities of different age, business organizations, and community groups. And then in the summer of 2018, we also did tabling at a number of public community events and in partnership with the City of Portland, broadened the conversation to transportation investments in Northeast Portland communities and held a Black community forum that focused on the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project, but also other transportation investments that are happening in the Northeast community. We also did significant business canvassing and reaching out to the affordable housing complexes within the project area, including Unthank Plaza, Myers Court, and the social services at Madrona Studios. So as part of that outreach and the number of other community groups that we talked to, these are just some highlights of what we've heard. We heard a lot of feedback on how to address congestion within the project area, interest in improving local street infrastructure for people biking and walking, and improving neighborhood connections, and increasing safety for modes. In terms of the project construction, there were a lot of questions and concerns around what will the construction impacts be? What can we do to minimize those impacts to our community while the project is constructed? We also got a lot of questions around project cost and ensuring that the project provides opportunities to bring economic benefits to the area and specifically the communities that were harmed during the original construction of I-5 and other urban developments in this area. So now we're in the environmental review phase, and so reached the key milestone of publishing the environmental assessment. Before we jump into the key findings, just want to take a step back and ask, what is an environmental assessment? And so an environmental assessment is part of the NEPA process, or the National Environmental Policy Act. It is a federal requirement for projects that have federal funding or require federal approval to go through and evaluate the impacts and benefits of the project. And so we're doing this in the form of an environmental assessment. We're evaluating the build alternative, which is the project that came out from the planning phase, so the recommended design concept, and comparing that to a no-build alternative, or not building the project. And we forecast out to year 2045 for that analysis to measure the long-term effects of the project, given the significant transportation investment. FHWA, or the Federal Highway Administration, is our federal partner in this process, and so they will review the technical findings of the environmental assessment along with all of the public comments that are received during this active comment period to then inform their decision around the NEPA decision document. And all of that public input and analysis will, of course, inform future design for the project as well.
Megan, can you explain the difference between an EA and an EIS?
Sure. So I'm gonna use a Goldilocks approach here. So for NEPA, there's sort of three different options that you can do, depending on the scale, complexity, anticipated impacts of your project. And so the baby bear of it would be the categorical exclusion, and that's we refer to as a CE, and that's when you know that there are no significant impacts from your project, and so you can document all of your findings as part of a CE. The Papa Bear, which is the larger document, it would be the environmental impact statement, and that is where you know that you have significant impacts that you can't mitigate to a less than significant level. In the middle is the environmental assessment approach. And so the environmental assessment is when you can't definitively say, we know we don't have significant impacts, and when you can't definitively say, we know we have significant impacts that we can't mitigate. And so you do the same level of technical evaluation for an environmental assessment and the same technical reports that you would for an EIS to evaluate those impacts. And if there are no significant impacts identified as part of the environmental assessment, the NEPA decision document is then a finding of no significant impact, or a FONSI. If significant impacts are identified that cannot be mitigated to a less than significant level as part of the environmental assessment, you would then go into an EIS with the ultimate decision document being a record of decision, or a ROD. And the ROD would identify what those significant impacts are and include findings to say that you may be accepting certain significant impacts given certain benefits that a project would provide. So in our environmental assessment, these are all of the topic areas that we evaluated. Again, the same topic areas that would be evaluated as part of an EIS. Technical reports were prepared for each of these that, again, would have been the same technical reports that would have been prepared as part of an EIS process. So I'm going to run through a couple of the topics that we think will be of most interest to the Commission, related to transportation, air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, noise, and the built environment. And if the Commission has any questions around any of the other topics, I'm happy to answer them as we can tonight, or get back to you with more information following this meeting. So in terms of vehicle operations, I think what you've heard Caitlin and Mauricio and I indicate is that as you look to I-5, the addition of auxiliary lanes and shoulders through the Rose Quarter area do have significant improvements to operations on I-5, saving about 2.5 million hours of delay each year. As we look towards the local street system, the local streets also benefit from this improved operation on I-5, with less queuing onto the local street systems, and with the relocation of the I-5 southbound on-ramp, that also helps with some of the travel movement on the local system. In some cases, some of the intersections do experience slightly more vehicle delay as a result of added separation of modes between drivers, people biking, and people walking. But the key is that all of those intersections continue to operate within acceptable standards for both the city and the state. In terms of safety, again, the addition of auxiliary lanes and shoulders provide a reduction in crashes on I-5, and as we look to the local street system with greater separation of modes, with protected bike lanes and wider sidewalks, we also see significant safety benefits to the local street system. So I'm going to turn it back to Caitlin to walk through some of the active transportation elements. Sure.
Mike.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
What do you mean by the ramp-to-ramp lanes? Could you explain that in a little more detail? I mean, it's a feature, and I wasn't quite sure why that was a feature. So
Sure. So you'll commonly hear two different terms for the same thing: ramp-to-ramp connections or auxiliary lanes. And those are the lanes on the highway where you're getting on one entrance and it carries directly to the next exit and ends at that exit. And so it gives drivers more time and space to make their merging and weaving movements.
So it just is a lane that goes from one ramp to the next one.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Short stripes.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
And why does that give you more time? Because when I come down I-5 and I'm trying to get to 84 almost always, and it doesn't. It seems like there's going to be a lot of this no matter what.
So there's a lot of that going on today,
Yes,
as
there
you
is, but
experience.
I'm not sure, why does the ramp-to-ramp mean that there's less of that? I would think there would be just about the same amount.
With the new ramp-to-ramp connections, rather than having those movements have to happen in a really short distance, the distance that drivers have to make that movement is greater. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have any less merging or weaving, but the length of space to do that is greater, which reduces the conflict that you see with the vehicles.
So here you can see some of the examples of where the project provides opportunities for greater separation for active modes and also the new connections over I-5. So to be able to cross I-5 without having to go into what Mauricio is referring to as the box area, the interchange of Broadway Weidler. So I'll go through kind of each of these, but this includes the top left is the Williams multi-use path, and then the Hancock-Dixon crossing further to the north, which is a new multimodal crossing, and then the new crossing to the south, the Clackamas crossing, which is pedestrian and bike only. I think in general, what the EA finds is that the project does offer bike facility improvements on the affected roadways. There is some likelihood of increased delay due to slight changes or changes in the travel distance, and then also riding through more signalized intersections. But those increased signals are addressing improvements to pedestrians and transit access as well. So as we get into design, some of the details that we'll be looking at are related to bike facility design, things like storage at intersections, ensuring that there is enough space for the anticipated amounts of current and future bike travel, looking at signal timing and phases for pedestrians and bikes, and then also the tie-ins to the existing network and areas that we can look to make improvements on the local networks that tie into this project. I think we can flip to the next. I'm going to just go into a little bit more detail on each of those elements. So the Clackamas and the Clackamas Bike and Ped Bridge is that alternative connection between Lloyd and the Rose Quarter on the southern side. And really two things to note here. First, this crossing may look like it's designed, but it really is just a concept. This shows one way that you could deal with what is a grade challenge on the west side in terms of the landing point. It shows the crossing kind of curving up towards Weidler. And this is something that the city's going to continue to work on with ODOT and others in terms of trying to find a design solution and how people using that crossing could more easily connect into the Rose Quarter closer to that intersection of Williams and Ramsey. And then also just looking to take the greatest advantage of this new connection and what those local surface street improvements may be required for that. And so on the west side, looking at the street, pedestrian, and bike facilities where it ties in. This is kind of up close to the Caloroga Terrace area, and so we'll be looking closer at that.
So, question about that. So the Bicycle Advisory Committee has commented that they basically don't know if this facility is useful or not because the endpoints don't really align with other parts of the network. A question I've asked you in other venues, and I hope you have the answer tonight, is what's the elevation gain to get over that crossing, total elevation gain?
Commissioner Smith, I had my team look at this, and I am sorry to say that I did not bring that number for you, but I know that you've asked it before, and I promise to get back to you with that number.
So the concern is that we hear anecdotally that there are people biking who avoid the Tillicum crossing, even though all the grades are ADA or less, but just because of the total elevation gain, there's a class of cyclists that that choose not to use that crossing. They want something with less elevation gain. So I'm concerned that to get over the freeway, you have to go up high enough that people will prefer other routes over this.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. I also think that with this connection, it is an additional new connection. It wouldn't be taking existing routes away in this area. And so I certainly think that grades are something we need to continue to look at and keep as a priority. But there will be alternative routes still available.
I do, and Chris addressed a little bit. I mean, and I realize this is early design, but it does seem like you're just kind of, it's a circuitous connection that I don't understand why I'd take. Like, I would avoid it because I feel like it's taking me out of my way for a lot of, and maybe I'm not getting the whole connection network.
Well, if you came from the south, as part of the Green Loop, you will go across the Sullivan's Crossing that is going to be built. You would go on 6th or 7th. You could take a left on Clackamas, and we would put you right in that spot. You go across, you go through the Rose Quarter, and go through the Broadway Bridge. So it would have, it does provide an efficiency there from that Green Loop movement. So also, it's not there today. What we have today is basically not a lot of development. But again, we're expecting 8,000 jobs and 5,000 households. So the area around it will feel a lot more dense, and there'll be a lot greater distance ability to use the facility. Also, as events happen, we can envision a lot of people just crossing it to get to the Rose Quarter Arena. A couple of examples.
Fair enough. So maybe it's just graphics, but like if I'm just looking at a map, I'm like, why wouldn't I just drive up to Weidler and cross at Weidler? I mean, I guess, it seems just out of my way is all, like just intuitively.
Yeah, it depends on where you're coming from. So.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking south. But anyway,
okay,
for whatever it's worth. So maybe it's just me not getting my head into it more, or your graphics might help understand the connection with the rest of the network and make that more understandable.
Okay.
Yeah, and as part of the upcoming urban design work that we will be embarking on as well, working with the community to kind of figure out how this bike ped bridge ultimately looks and how it connects to address these questions that are really important.
Okay, so the Hancock-Dixon crossing, which we've mentioned, and Mauricio touched on in the planning history in terms of looking at the lack of east-west connections over the highway. This crossing really does look to provide that much-needed connectivity. It does have a relatively short section with grade challenges here as well, in terms of getting over the freeway and then going into the lower Albina area, the earth starts to drop off there. So the project is also including in the environmental stage and continuing to study the integration of a multi-use path, which would be another alternative connection that would have ADA compliant grades. And then again, another alternative for someone walking or biking that doesn't want to use a potential multi-use path or a steeper grade on the Dixon side could be to stay on Vancouver to Broadway in those improved bike and pedestrian facilities. And then taking a little bit closer look on the next slide in terms of the changes.
Before we leave that, I have a number of questions about this. So as you said, there's a 10% grade for more than 100 feet, right? That's clearly not ADA. I would say that's not a pedestrian street. It's not a bicycle street. It's an auto street. And this is the magic connection that's going to open up the Blanchard site, right, Mauricio? So our TSP says we should have multimodal streets, and we should be prioritizing pedestrians, cyclists, and transit. Streetcar can't handle more than the 7% grade, so we're never going to run a streetcar through that connection. So how does this actually open up the Blanchard site for anything other than cars? And if that's all it does, then doesn't it fail our TSP?
I don't think I'm not sure a single element of a project can be just passing or not passing the TSP. But as a whole, the project does increase connectivity. We learned as part of this environmental assessment that we have this great differential, for which, as Caitlin mentioned, you can keep going straight south and take a right, and you end up largely the same point. We have in the city of Portland steep grades, and they're still called streets, and they're still walkable and bikeable. Not by everybody. We regret to say that we have this great differential right now, but we have also provided 2 alternatives so far. It will be a street. It will have sidewalks and trees and utilities and freight and deliveries, but it won't be as convenient as a flat route. But it's not exactly. I wouldn't call it a car-only route.
Some other questions about that. So you've offered the multi-use path as an alternative. I'd point out that doesn't give you access to the Blanchard site. It takes you back to Broadway. So in terms of a low-grade way. And you're replacing Flint, which has a nice gentle grade that gets you through that elevation distance. I mean, I honestly don't know that this is better than just keeping Flint. And if it is providing access to Blanchard, I'm a little unclear how it does it, because it only connects to the east to Vancouver and Williams, and then MLK hits a median, right? So you can't cross MLK on Hancock. So if we're assuming we're going to bring more cars into Blanchard through this, aren't we putting more traffic on the 2 major city bikeways that are the key access to northeast Portland? And how does that not contradict our priorities under the TSP?
I'm not sure that it does generate more traffic, but we can look into the analysis.
It doesn't generate more traffic. Why do we need it?
It will provide more access. It will provide. I'm not sure the analysis during the PM peak that we have shows a much greater volume on Vancouver Williams. I don't have that answer with you, but it should provide more connections, just like any local street provides some connectivity. I'm not. Yeah.
And I think the next slide, if you want to flip to, this looks at the existing Flint route and elimination of the Flint crossing and how that is replaced with Hancock-Dixon. And so, first, in terms of this graphic, I want to point out where the Harriet Tubman Middle School is located. That's highlighted in purple. And the changes to the Flint Street current condition proposed in the project would provide a safety benefit for the students that are getting to and from the school today. Today, Flint is used really as a cut-through route by autos, freight, to access the Broadway Bridge from northeast Portland. The majority of that traffic is one way, kind of from north to south, but it certainly is also a very popular bike route for people accessing the Broadway Bridge from Vancouver. So with the project, Flint would terminate. It would turn into Tillamook, and that crossing of I-5 would be removed. That safety benefit being that the cut-through traffic in front of the middle school would be eliminated. And then also kind of looking, Commissioner Smith, in terms of the future anticipated intensity of land use and jobs and housing in the area, if that were to be remaining, that would just be putting more volume of traffic on Flint in front of the school, which would certainly be a safety concern. Local access to the school will remain on Russell from the north and Tillamook to the south. And here you can kind of see just how the routes change and the options in the future route to the Broadway Bridge from northeast, either using the new connection down Dixon, the dashed line, there is the potential multi-use path, or continuing on to Broadway itself.
I appreciate your concern for the school. I'd note that you're also moving the freeway significantly closer to the school with attendant air quality impacts. And in fact, the Portland Public School Board has asked that you proceed to a full EIS to evaluate the impacts on the school, correct?
Yes, they have made that request.
Thank you.
So the next slide, looking at transit, most of transit operations really stay the same with or without the project. Part of this is due to just the project area, really focusing on this interchange and not being a longer corridor project. That being said, the improvements proposed to address pedestrian, sidewalk quality and crossings and other local street improvements can improve safe transit access. And I believe, Commissioner Smith, you've already mentioned that streetcar travel times really remain about the same. I think there's a very, very slight improvement anticipated with the project, and there are no impacts to light rail, and then there's a slight bus delay found due to the added signals and separation of modes, and that's on Vancouver Williams. And again, the new signal that's proposed at Hancock-Dixon is also addressing a pedestrian crossing gap, and so that's one of the areas of a very common trade-off that we see in terms of adding protection, separation of modes, and potential delay.
So let's talk about delay a little bit. So you've touted 2.5 million hours of vehicle delay avoided. Have you calculated the additional hours of person delay through delaying cyclists and the 4 and the 44 bus?
We did not calculate it in terms of person delay.
Mm-hmm.
We did it in terms of kind of looking at operations and movements of the bikes and the vehicles.
So I'll remind my colleagues that our TSP prioritizes people walking, biking, and taking transit ahead of people in single occupancy vehicles. So I think it's contradicted here. Yeah, I understand that the streetcar, the east-west streetcar movement is approximately the same also for the 17 bus in that area. But I note that the streetcar CAC has requested a transit priority lane so that we can actually improve operations of the streetcar. And it may not be getting worse, but it's not getting better either. And if we're going to spend $500 million, we really ought to make transit work better, not just staying the same is good enough. It's not good enough. I think I've made the point that we're delaying those modes contradictory to our TSP.
I appreciate your comments, Chris. I guess the only kind of question mark in my mind is if through signalization, which is causing a lot of the delay, it's making things safer, you're still prioritizing, you could say, the peds and the bikes, which are adding to the delay at the intersections, because you're trying to make things safer for them. I mean, if the signals and delays are happening due to increase in bike lanes and pedestrian connections, then they're intertwined. Is all I guess I'm trying to say. And I get your point, but I think there's kind of a flip side.
And I question that because we only need to add the signals because we are making bikes cross from side to side as they move through the corridor. So they, sometimes it's left side running, sometimes it's right side running, and you have to move them across at a signalized intersection. Basically, they're crossing with transit when they do that. So you're introducing the delay to both modes because you're creating crossings, and we're only doing that so we can get Hancock-Dixon and get rid of Flint. So you're solving a problem that the project creates by delaying them. Yes, you're probably improving safety somewhat, but if we started out this project, say, how are we going to make bikes and transit safer in this area, we would do very different things to do that and probably not add delay in the process. So I think, this is a consequence of all the things we're doing to make cars move faster down on the freeway. We get forced into these trade-offs up on the surface.
I will just quickly respond in terms of some of the elements we've looked at with streetcar. I know that through this area and in collaboration with another PBOT project, which Mauricio could probably talk about more, but the Broadway Widler Safety Project, we have looked at the lanes and utilization of the lanes through here. And one of the challenges certainly with looking at a transit-only lane is that streetcars running on the left and TriMet buses are on the right, and that's where stops are. But we are also continuing to look at other, PBOT, this is separate from the project, improvements to streetcar operations on this line. So I know that right now there is a business and a BAT lane, business and transit access only, is that the right acronym? Project that is under construction on Grand from about Ash to Everett. And then through enhanced transit planning, there's other BAT lanes that are being studied and recommended. So it's certainly something that we are aware of and looking at how to prioritize transit through this area.
All right. So in terms of air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, we did an evaluation as part of the environmental assessment following the Federal Highway Administration methods. So we followed those kind of federal methods for both of these using the EPA MOVES emission model and then the FHWA infrastructure carbon, or what you might hear as an ICE tool. And so the process for doing these evaluations, as I said, is looking out to year 2045 and comparing the no build to the build project. Regardless of building the project or not, look with the US EPA MOVES model, the projections are that pollutant emissions and greenhouse gas emissions are expected to decrease between now and year 2045 through increased fuel efficiency, a shift towards electric vehicles. And so as we fast forward to year 2045 and do the comparison, emissions are substantially lower at that point than they are today. When you compare building the project to not building the project, there's a slight decrease in emissions with building the project as compared to not building the project. And that's really a result of improved operations on I-5 with reducing stop and go traffic, reducing idling that does result in significant pollutant emissions. We also looked at carbon, we did a carbon monoxide hotspot evaluation, and none were identified within the project area.
So if we could talk about the assumptions behind that. So emissions go down because you don't have the stop and go, you have more freely moving traffic, correct? That only happens if you assume no induced demand and that you don't pick up more traffic as a result, right? So you've assumed no induced demand here, is that correct?
We are not adding new through lanes as part of the project, and so the project itself is not inducing new corridor-wide trips on I-5.
Okay, so I have some challenges with that assumption. So back in 2012, when this was here the first time, I asked the question, why don't we have a TDM alternative? And the answer I got from PBOT was, there's so much latent demand that if we take somebody off the freeway because of TDM, another person is there just waiting to fill their slot. So it seems to me it's one way or the other. Either traffic is, demand is inelastic and TDM solutions would be effective, or demand is elastic and improving the flow will just attract more traffic. I don't think you can have it both ways, which, based on the answer I got in 2012, the answer I'm getting today, seems like you're trying to do. The other thing I want to poke at is, I believe your modeling assumes all the projects in the 2014 Metro RTP, which of course includes the Columbia River crossing, right? So you're assuming at some point down the road the CRC gets built, even though politically we've yet to find a configuration or a price tag that appeals to both sides of the river. If you're directing a fire hose of new traffic from the CRC at Rose Quarter, the modeling during the CRC was Rose Quarter's the next bottleneck. So if you are loosening the bottleneck, doesn't that mean that in the build model, the CRC is going to be able to contribute a lot more traffic to this area than in the no-build model, because the no-build model would keep the bottleneck. So if traffic goes up, then emissions go up. So I'm still trying to figure out how you have this magic reduction in emissions, because if the CRC comes online, we know the traffic's going to go up, and the bottleneck might actually be the thing that saves us from more emissions.
It's better to look at the numbers. However, from 2012, again, we're not solving. We're adding a NOx lane for a rent to run for a limited period of length. there's still quite a bit of two-laners to
Right,
the
but
north.
you're trying to improve reliability, right?
I'm just saying,
The benefit here is the non-recurring congestion, not the recurring congestion, right? We've had that discussion here before. So if you make the road more reliable because you've knocked down the non-recurring congestion, you're going to attract more people who want to use it, right? If you make it easier to use, you will get more users.
But it's not a fire hose. You know, you're not breaking through.
Well, the last 12-lane CRC I saw looked like a fire hose to me.
There's a long distance between CRC and here, and there's constraints to the south, to the east, and to the north. I think the project adds space to maneuver, but it's not opening up enough around it that it can actually flood the area. I think that's roughly speaking what the analysis has been showing. However, there's an analysis, there's a report on that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's still 2 through lanes coming into the project area and still 2 through lanes going out of the project area. So in that regard, we're not creating a fire hose that would allow significant new demand to move along that full corridor. Yes, we are making it easier and giving drivers more time and space to make that key merging movement between where 3 interstates come together, but not increasing the capacity of the full I-5 corridor. I'm sorry, I was having a hard time hearing the question.
He's asking if the I-5 crossing proceeds. You mean CRC? Eli, could you ask one more time?
I mean, yes, the CRC. I never quite heard the answer of whether, I think Chris posed the question of whether the modeling assumes the CRC proceeds, and I didn't quite hear the answer to that one.
Sure, happy to answer that for you. So the traffic modeling uses the Metro Travel Demand Model, which is derived from the Regional Transportation Plan, or what we as a region have adopted in terms of transportation investments. And so the no-build scenario does include all of the financially constrained projects that are listed on the Regional Transportation Plan, which does include the Columbia River Crossing project.
It does. The same assumptions for no build and build.
Pardon, Eli?
Is congestion pricing one of them also, or not?
No, congestion pricing is not one of them. It was not in the 2014 RTP. We understand that there are a number of tools that we need to address congestion in the area, with value pricing or congestion pricing being one of them. But that's a separate project and a separate timeline. We don't know the exact termini or the exact type of pricing, and for that reason, it's not yet in the Regional Transportation Plan and not assumed as part of this evaluation.
I have some questions about that once we get through the rest of this. We'll come back to congestion pricing. I do want to note for my colleagues that I distributed an article to you from Congress from New Urbanism that basically documents the many urban freeway projects where induced demand was a very real outcome, and I believe it will be here as well.
All right. I'll quickly go through the remaining slides here. So in terms of noise, we also did a noise analysis, again, in line with the Federal Highway Administration's noise model and field measurements that we took, including a specific measurement at the Lillis Albina Park and Harriet Tubman Middle School. And what was found here is that, yes, there would be small increase in noise levels with the project as compared to not building the project. However, those sound levels are not at the level that would be detectable by a human ear. That said, there are 2 sound walls that are proposed as part of the project to provide acoustic benefits to some sensitive receptors near I-5, including Harriet Tubman Middle School and Lillis Albina Park, as well as some residencies in the southern portion of the project area. I'm just highlighting the noise levels here that we're projecting at the middle school, showing the existing noise levels, and then the no build or without the project in year 2045. And then with the project and the provision of the sound wall would actually reduce the noise levels to below the existing noise levels that we see today in that area. A lot of the built environment, specifically land use topics, I think were covered in Mauricio's overview of really how this transportation project was done concurrently with the Central City 2035 planning, or at the time the North-Northeast Quadrant plan, and the the MMA designation is also contingent upon kind of a good faith effort in moving forward with this Rose Quarter Improvement Project. And the project is also consistent with the Metro Regional Transportation Plan. In terms of property impacts or right-of-way impacts, no residencies would be impacted or displaced as part of this project, but there would be 4 commercial businesses that would be impacted and displaced, and a commitment that we have as part of the environmental assessment and required to move forward with is that we will obviously be complying with and following federal and state requirements for relocation and displacement of any affected properties. Short-term construction impacts, the construction period will be about a 4 to 5 year period in duration. That does not mean that the entirety of the Rose Quarter area will be under construction per se during that 4 to 5 year period. We'll be looking at how we stage and phase construction, knowing that there are a high volume of users in all different modes and the need to keep the traveling public moving during this process. And so commitments and mitigation in the environmental assessment include providing signed and safe detour routes for all modes, and then developing a traffic control plan and an associated communication plan, again, to keep the traveling public moving. The construction equipment will result in some increased dust, exhaust, and noise, but will be, again, with mitigation from the environmental assessment requiring best management practices to control the dust, limit equipment idling, and work hours. And speaking of work hours, one of the concerns that we heard from the Portland Public School Board was how will construction be impacting the middle school given the proximity of I-5. And a commitment that we've made and have included in the environmental assessment is to focus the construction activities near the school during the summer months to avoid disruption. And in our analysis have not found that construction of I-5 would impact the school structure either. So those are some of the key findings. There's a number of ways to comment and provide your input on this process, including 2 events that were just held earlier this month, an open house and public hearing. But written comments are still accepted through April 1st.
A question about that.
Sure.
So some of us are preparing comments that involve some large electronic attachments, too big to go through your email channel. What would you suggest is the best way to deliver those?
There's a couple of different ways. The email that we have does accept large attachments, so I would encourage you to still do that.
My Gmail stops at 25 meg, so
okay.
I'm constrained.
We would be happy to accept them on a flash drive that you could deliver to the mailing address that's here. Does that sound like a reasonable approach?
You could expect to see me on Friday or Monday. Thanks.
All right. And looking forward, one of the programs that we are standing up relates to addressing one of the questions that we heard up front in our community engagement is, with this significant project, what are the economic opportunities that this project can provide in terms of jobs or wealth creation for our local community? And so we are partnering with the City of Portland and PBOT to establish a DBE and on-the-job training or workforce opportunity program that's focused on the guiding principles that you see here on the screen to really maximize opportunities for engagement of local, small, and minority contractors in project design and construction. With that, we also have a number of committees that we are standing up to continue the robust community engagement, including an overall project community advisory committee for the life of the project, an urban design committee that would be really focused on some of the near-term design discussions and decisions, including some of the questions that were brought up today around the Clackamas Bicycle and Pedestrian Bridge, the highway covers, Hancock-Dixon connection, and then a committee that's focused specifically on the economic opportunities that I just mentioned before. In addition to those committees, we'll be hosting a number of workshops, open houses, design charrettes to engage the broader community in those design decisions. So just a reminder again of the timeline where we are and of the EA public comment period closing on Monday. And so with that, I think our team will close and just noting that now is the opportunity to comment on the technical information provided in the environmental assessment.
Great, thank you. I have one quick question, and I know my fellow commissioners, will, especially Chris, will have more. Can you just explain the sawtooth configuration of the caps?
Sure.
I'm sure you've been asked.
Yes. So the highway covers right now, again, while they look like their final design, they are not. The way that they are shown right now is based on the preliminary design concept, and we've evaluated really the footprint or the box that they would go within as part of the environmental assessment. To note really the space that we have to work with. That said, as we move forward into design, there is opportunity to look at the configuration and the angles of the highway cover, so long as they remain kind of within the footprint that we've evaluated as part of the environmental assessment.
But
Okay, that I'm going to poke at you on a little bit more, because
Okay.
that was just a lot of words for. Is it due to construction constraints? Is it due to? Yeah, I'm getting a nod. Like, it's like, why do you have a hole that seems like between these two little ones? Like, why not just fill it in? And so I'm guessing,
Sure.
what I mean?
Yeah. So the reason that they are two separate highway covers is that the moment you connect them, it becomes a tunnel, and a tunnel requires significant more kind of structure, fire suppression, potentially has impact to what you can carry in terms of hazardous material on I-5 and cost. And so those were the key considerations for separating the highway covers to maximize the length that they can be without triggering the tunnel requirement.
Okay, that's helpful.
I also understand that the lids are supported in the middle as well as at the edges. So because the freeway is cutting us a diagonal, you end up with kind of a zigzag design as trying to put the pillars in the right place.
Yeah. Okay. And then one last question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm just going to put it out there, as I think it's unfortunate not to be able to have these be able to support some type of built structure, and I'm sure that's also cost driven. But I think getting open space out is a good thing, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have some open space too, but I think understanding how to have some built structure on there to help support really tying the neighborhood together is something worth considering.
Yeah.
In your next phases.
Definitely. And we will be working with the community in that, along with some additional feasibility analysis to determine what's possible on top of those highway covers.
Okay. Let's go, Ben. How about that? We'll just kind of come around this way. Sorry, Chris, you've been asking questions, so I was going to let you wrap up.
I'm just going to add really quickly, sorry, in response to that comment. We have also been working with ODOT and our stakeholder Albina Vision, who their vision does include structures on the covers, and we have been talking about that a lot with them. And so we have worked together on some preliminary studies to see what the residual structural capacity of the covers as currently designed is, to see what the development capacity could be. And I think that work is going to be really important to kind of set up the urban design charrettes and work that will be coming. So we have kind of the sideboards of that. But I know, and Megan, correct me here, but some of the initial engineering analysis does show that there's some residual capacity to support smaller scale development. I think it's 1 to 2 stories in certain areas, but there are things that I think we are encouraged by that we'll be able to work with.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you for the great presentation, the great graphic material that you have. I think it really helped me kind of get up to speed on the project. I'm one of those newer commissioners that still need to get up to speed with it. One minor recommendation I would give you is to add north arrow and name of streets on every graphic that you have, especially the perspectives. It's kind of hard to understand exactly where you are when you're looking at perspective. But really broadly speaking, I'm still struggling to understand the real driver of this project, and it being safety. It seems when you say 3.5 times the crash rate of the rest of the network, but then you also explain that it's really compared to other freeways, I'm assuming, so similar streets, especially as it relates to other streets within the city, other differently classified streets within the city, like 82nd, other 122nd streets that we know are big offenders when it comes to crash rates and fatalities. I think someone pointed out that there has not been a fatality here for a long time. Not that we need to wait for it, obviously, and having a lot of crashes is certainly a good reason for it. But I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit more on that. If you can do it now or maybe follow up with it.
Sure. So in terms of safety, it's both safety and operations, and in this area, they're they come together. So by reducing frequent crashes on the system, which is a safety concern, and with the addition of the auxiliary lanes and the shoulders to do that, the shoulders provide space for those disabled vehicles to pull out of the way of traffic as well. And so if you are in a fender bender or sideswipe collision, you now have a safe space to pull out of the way of traffic. And then with that, with there being 2 through lanes in each direction, that traffic is no longer kind of compounding the operational and really congestion and bottlenecks that we see in the area. ODOT and the City of Portland also do have programs and funding that look towards the high crash corridor networks like 82nd and Powell. Including a joint project that we're working on together now, the Outer Powell Safety Improvement Project. And so we at ODOT, and I'm sure I can speak for the city, are very committed to improving safety region-wide. And so the Rose Quarter project isn't just the only project where we're addressing safety. It's broader than that and looking at those arterials and for areas for improvement as well.
And we were here a couple of weeks ago for 82nd Avenue plan. Yeah. So.
Another question I have is in regards to the lids and specifically the testimony that Portland Parks and Recreation gave as far as not being willing to maintain those lids. What's your perspective and answer to that position?
So we still have a robust community process to go through for the highway covers to determine what those uses will be on top of the highway covers. And so at this point, we're not presuming what's on top. And of course, committed to continuing to work with the city and Portland Parks and Rec in those conversations regarding the uses and then potential ownership and
I think it will be really, really important if some of that area is used as park space or open space, that parks is part of that conversation all along, and that it's designed and programmed in a way that they feel will be successful.
Mm-hmm. Are you finished, Ben?
I am, yeah.
Okay, Teresa.
Oh, just a comment on what's on the lid. So in Seattle, they did some cover. It wasn't over the freeway, but the art museum used it to make a really fantastic sculpture park that the art museum takes care of, but is open and free for people to go to. And it connected a part of downtown with the waterfront that was just sort of these giant railroad tracky, ditchy things that you couldn't go through. So it was it's a nice model.
Yeah, during the Northeast Quadrant plan, I think we identified a lack of open space in this area, so the lids could be that function. At the same time, the devil's in the details. What do they look like? What kind of shape? Can an active use be better? Again, we're in 5% design. There's a lot more conversation to be had.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand where we, Planning Commission, are in terms of your process and where all this future work's going to be done. Obviously, we don't have much time to comment. We're being presented 2 or 3 days before, so it's obviously not a realistic opportunity for us to comment. And in that same regard, there were some letters about the 45-day comment period began before certain design material was even available to people who were interested in commenting. Is that true?
The environmental assessment included all of the technical information. There were some requests for some additional information around that that is summarized in the environmental assessment. And we did provide that information, and we did provide the engineering drawings that are also described and illustrated in the environmental assessment.
Don't have enough knowledge to respond to that, but it's the same concern. Let me tell you my overall concern. This project's obviously got funding and political support at the state level. It's moving quickly. It's great that all the engineers have got the vision down, but I'm concerned that the sort of design details and the urban planning details will always be struggling to catch up. And so I know the bicycle community, and Chris has raised a lot of concerns about the bicycle planning and multimodal planning. We've heard a lot of concerns about the lids and who's thought them through, and we're hearing, well, we know we have a lot more design work to go, and you show a 3-year design phase, but I also saw the final funding decisions, cost to construct, are due in less than a year. So I'm nervous, and I'm not sure how we comment on this, that, well, we've got 3 years to work out these very tricky urban design issues, but really in less than a year, you're going to commit to funding. So my concern would be, as we have 2+ years of more design discussions, there'll be this, well, funding's already committed. Funding's already committed. So I'm just nervous that that'll be a mantra throughout this. There'll be concerns, questions, legitimate concerns and questions. It'll take a lot of time to work out the design of these lids. And how important is that February 2020 deadline you showed us, where funding's got to be committed?
Yeah, so that's a direction from the state legislature, and so we do have to meet that timeline.
So we're running out of time, so let me just, and I'm not sure how to comment on this. I'm concerned that it seems like there's more than 10 months worth of public input and design that's going to be needed to be sure collectively multimodal concerns, park open space concerns are being met. And you've just sort of indicated, yeah, we've got this hard deadline in 10 months. So as I look at it, I don't really see a 3-year time period to work on these important design considerations. I see a 10-month, because that's when you have this, apparently you have to tell the legislature, this is what's going to cost. So I'm just concerned you've set up a very difficult process for the public to participate in. And that would be my comment going forward, to think through how you're going to rectify that.
I don't do freeway design, so I'm not going to presume to understand the timelines, but and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, understanding building design process, and we do building designs. We don't do it so much here locally, but in California that go through an EIR process as well. So we're kind of doing a similar work with the state. We analyze similar things, and we're bringing a design. So that's kind of why I asked the design question, like, how far are they? 5% is barely done any work. So to me, I'm like, you just have a general notion at 5% of what you're doing, which is part of your concern, I get. At the same time, in 10 months period of time, you don't have final design documents, but you have, I can assume, and you can speak to this, you're going to be at what percent at that point?
We'll be 15 to 20% around cost to complete report, which means that there's still work to be done and community engagement to be done after that process. But we will be we will have to make some assumptions around the cost for the cost to complete report.
I would just add that's a fairly common tension in infrastructure planning, is the political commitments around funding and the design progress.
And the only difference, I think, in more traditional highway construction, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, is it doesn't always come with this level of urban design component. This is not just a highway infrastructure project. This is part of a community urban design and planning process. And so I'm not sure. It seems to me there's a challenge in melding the two, and I'm just cautioning, I hope, as a planning process, you figure out how to meld the two, and it's not just a highway project, and oh, by the way, yeah, we've got some urban planning to do on the side. I hope the urban designing part gets as much attention as the highway infrastructure part.
Definitely.
You should. Thank you. And I do appreciate the efforts and the outreach you're making.
Yeah, Ben asked my question, but I'll just ask for follow-up clarification. That is one of the concerns I had is in terms of prioritization over safety. When we hear about all of the deaths in the East County, in the East City, whether this project will actually suck all the resources away from being able to address those as well. I mean, I think I heard the question correctly, and I thought I heard you say, no, they're not really competing. Is that true?
That's true. The funding that's provided through House Bill 2017 is separate and dedicated funding for Rose Quarter that doesn't take away from the funding that's already in place and programmed for safety improvements on the arterial systems.
It also gave money, the same bill gave money to Outer Powell and a bunch of other programs, transit, safe routes to school. So it was part of a larger state packet.
Mm-hmm.
People are asking some of my questions, which you probably are going to like. The covers, I wanted to ask a little bit more because they just kind of look kind of golfy to me right now, and I think that's because you've been trying to just put something out there, and I get that. But what will they support? Will they support trees?
Yeah,
because I mean, it kind of looks like there's some trees in there, but they're all smaller than the other trees. So will it support full-size trees?
I think, Megan, you can talk about that maybe in more detail. I know I can speak to definitely the challenge that we faced with looking at these graphics because we wanted to show the new area and the opportunities, but we also didn't want to make it look like it was overly designed or programmed. So, yeah, I think in terms of the structural analysis that has been done, I believe the open space landscaping is all a use that they can support, and then that further looking at that mixed with buildings. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the noise problems, though? I mean, if you think about it being a park, most parks don't have kind of a roaring freeway. So I would think you'd have to be thinking about some other way to utilize that rather than it being a park for people to sit and have a picnic or something like that.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's just what kinds of ideas have been kicked around about that because I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think that question is a really important one and one that we'll be working with the community and thinking about the existing noise levels or future noise levels in the area and urban design, landscaping features or potentially other structural features that can be put up to make those spaces really an asset for the community.
But nothing has been proposed at this point.
No.
I think another benefit that we have is that while this is a new concept at this stage for Portland, there are precedents in other cities that have been doing highway covers that we are beginning to get a better understanding of in terms of the strategies they've implemented and how they have been programmed to be really effective community spaces. So that's something we're going to continue to lean on in the design process.
Yeah, also, since we're talking about structure, all these again will be rebuilt to the latest seismic upgrade. So the whole area will get a much more resilient infrastructure as a result.
Oh, okay. Well, that's important. What about housing? I mean, you didn't say much about housing, and there's kind of a move these days to couple housing with changes in transportation. So is there any way to do that? Is there any way I know that the legislature, I think that the legislature recently passed something for more, to pay for more housing and low-income housing. Is there any way that this project could include low-income housing for this neighborhood that you've identified as being formerly African American, et cetera?
So the funding that's programmed for this particular project would not be able to be used for affordable housing. That said, the transportation infrastructure that's built as part of this project does support the city's land use vision, which does include the provision of affordable housing.
Okay. And I think it's a kind of a, it's too bad. I mean, that would make me very happy and more supportive of this project. And then where is the traffic going to bunch up? I mean, if this is smoothing it out, but it's not really, what you're saying is it's smoothing it out, but it's not really increasing it. Where's the, but that, it has been a choke point. So where is the traffic going to bunch up next?
So it's
must have looked at that way.
It's improving operations on I-5 between 84 and 405. So it's addressing this particular bottleneck on I-5. We continue to have bottlenecks that we know that we're going to need to address on I-5 and other
you know where they're going to
systems.
be? I mean, you must know where they're going to be.
Yeah, the metro has a model of the future. It's red everywhere. It is red right now.
It's red everywhere?
Yeah.
Does that mean it's congested
It's congested,
everywhere?
yeah. I'm just
okay.
referring to if you look at a Google map at 6 p.m. Throughout the region, we are living in a congested region now. Again, you know, so that's the reality. That's the future. You know, that's what, despite all of our billions of dollars of investment in transportation options. You know, again, we're a growing city, so we need to balance the need, you know, to get people as many people out of their cars, but with the need to also maintain a functional highway system that can provide, you know, freight and reliability through and serve the state. You know.
Okay, thank you. I guess my last question was kind of, I think you might have answered it. Is this project a separate project that the legislature said, spend this money on this project?
Yes.
Okay. And how much money was that?
So the legislature has defined a bonding program for this, and so that would begin in 2022. Based on our current estimates today, with about a 25-year bond at 5% interest rate, it's approximately $420 million provided through House Bill 2017.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So I have a couple areas I'd like to get into that we haven't talked a lot about yet. The first is congestion pricing. So you said, and Julie, if you could bring up my slides, that would be great. You said you're not considering a congestion pricing alternative because it's not in the RTP, right? But in fact, House Bill 2017 that gave you the funding for this project mandated examination of a congestion pricing program. And in fact, ODOT has made an application to FHWA for permission to do that and gotten positive indications. Is that correct? So this is a slide. Yeah, you can start on this one. This is a slide that Region 1 Director presented to the OTC in December, and it essentially shows the congestion pricing being done before you finish construction on your project. Now, obviously, this is not certain. Not saying it is, but I think particularly for the traffic modeling, I believe the standard in NEPA is reasonably foreseeable, right? So I don't know how it cannot be reasonably foreseeable that there will be congestion pricing this corridor, and therefore why isn't it either an alternative or at least in your modeling of the traffic?
So there's still a lot of, we're still in the initial, like, premature phases of value pricing. The work that was done over the past year was a feasibility analysis based on direction from the legislature in House Bill 2017 to look at the I-5 and I-205 corridors. And one of the recommendation from that group was to focus on smaller segments on each of those corridors. And so we have an idea of the general segments, but we don't know the specific termini of where pricing could begin on those corridors. We also don't know what the type of pricing program would be, and for those reasons, it's too speculative to include value pricing and the baseline assumption for the Rose Quarter evaluation.
Looks like your boss is speculating on that program helping pay for your project. So if you're going to use the money, I think you have to include it in the traffic modeling, at least as a possibility. It could be a scenario, right? But I mean, the standard is reasonably foreseeable. This looks reasonably foreseeable to me. I also just want to clarify if I read this slide, it looks to me like the project cost is now up around $560 million between design and construction. Is there a new official range for what you think the cost of the project is?
The cost estimate that we've done today is about $450 to $500 million based on current dollars.
Okay, so why is Ryan saying 500 for construction and 60 for design?
That number may be projected to year of expenditure.
Okay. And to the point about, Katie's point about where's it going to congest next, didn't the value pricing study essentially say this corridor will have hypercongestion until you do pricing? I think that's an accurate characterization of the consultant report.
I think, as I said earlier, there's a number of ways that we know that we're going to need to address congestion. One of them is value pricing, but one of them is also really addressing the geometric issue and configuration through auxiliary lanes in this key area.
So value pricing costs $100 million to implement. It's a lot cheaper than $500 million, and I'm not sure how much we need your project if we have congestion pricing. But let me move on. If we go to the next slide.
Well, you do need it for the surface improvements.
I'm not sold on the value of the surface improvements, Mauricio. I think we're going backwards.
Okay, I just
We
want
go to the next slide.
Oop.
Sorry.
So this is a cross-section from the traffic report in the EA. And you have 3 travel lanes, 12 feet each, and 12-foot shoulders both on the outsides and in the center against the center median, correct? Those are really generous shoulders. And I assume they're expensive because I would guess that every extra foot you have to span the freeway adds tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to the project. So why such wide shoulders?
So the shoulders, again, recognizing that we're at 5% design, but the shoulders are currently designed to standards for urban interstates. And so 12 feet is the standard, and they do provide significant safety benefits, not only for space for disabled vehicles to move out of the way, but for emergency responders to use that space to access potentially an incident within Rose Quarter or beyond.
So is the Banfield considered a safe facility?
I think that the Banfield also has limited shoulders as well.
The Banfield has 7 feet on the outside and 4 feet on the inside. And I think that's even been called out in some FHWA documents as a good practice. My point is that if you take all this pavement and you cut the shoulders down to 7 feet and 4 feet, you could squeeze another travel lane on both sides. So I'm concerned that there's an 8-lane freeway hiding inside this project. Can you tell us what would prevent an ODOT striping crew from going out there some weekend and turning this into a 4-lane cross-section on each side?
I think at this point, we've worked collectively with the city of Portland to define the parameters of the project, and that it's not adding a new through lane, it's adding an auxiliary lane. And so we're consistent with city plans, consistent with what OTC directed us back in 2012 as auxiliary lanes as part of the project.
But would something stop you in 2035 from restriping the freeway?
I don't think that is the intention here as part of this project.
I sure hope so. Wasn't the intention to have the Columbia Crossing without any shoulders either, but we took out the shoulders to add a lane on the existing Columbia Crossing. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion. Hopefully, we can wrap this up and see if there's support for this. So yeah, obviously I'm.
Sure, Eli.
Sure. Oh, sorry, Eli.
I guess just a thought. I've lived for almost all of the 25 years I've been in Portland, in North and Northeast Portland, where I travel through this area and move to downtown. And I've most of the time had a car. I've always had a bike, and I often make decisions on how to go downtown based on what I'm expecting. I'm going to have to go through to get there, and I find that by biking I don't have anything slowing me down. That seems to be a clear path, and the current improvements I use all the time, the front overpass or Hill Bridge after the Rose Quarter. If I'm thinking about driving downtown, which is often tempting because sometimes it's not such nice weather, I have to think in the back of my mind that I might have some intermittent delay going through that squirrely interchange, and that tends to make me think twice about driving. It feels to me like this project, by creating more free-flowing conditions for drivers going through there, might make many potential cyclists or transit riders in the situation think twice about biking and just drive instead. And my concern is that this project
Before we go to the motion, could I ask one question too? I'm trying to make this brief, but Mauricio, you mentioned earlier the MMA. Is it correct that I want to make sure I understand this, but is it correct that the MMA is contingent on a package of infrastructure improvements around the central city, that's sort of the nature of that agreement that governs how we look at transportation adequacy in the central city plan? And so this is one of those projects. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually it's part now of the Central City Plan. ODOT submitted the letter. We have this project plus I think 3 others throughout the Central City. There are safety projects where it touches the freeway, and our network touches the freeway network, and we worked it out via a grant. And so the letter, basically says ODOT agrees with our the safety package, and we think that we tell the state that ODOT agrees that this area should be an MMA and that it will be safe, and it's okay not to meet the other standards, congestion, mobility. So that's already adopted. Same with the up zones and all that land use changes that happen as we were doing the transportation findings for this.
So what an MMA does is kind of give us that multimodal evaluation mechanism for central city land use changes.
Yeah, and doesn't have a termination date.
I just want to quickly add something, Chris. Can see your concern about lanes or pull-off areas, sideway, or what are they called?
Shoulders.
Shoulders, thank you. Being, interestingly, the same size as a lane. That all being said, for those who have garages, your garage typically allows for about 12 feet per car because you can't open a door and get in and out very easily. So on a freeway with cars moving fast, providing space for a car to sit there with some side between the car and your concrete barriers to actually be able to get in and out of the car safely, to me seems vitally important.
Right, and my comment was just that the Banfield works with.
But I don't think the Banfield feels safe to me. So, for instance, if I had to pull over in the middle and there's a 4-foot shoulder, that's not good. I mean, to me, you're stuck in your car,
right,
going like this, waiting for somebody to come save you.
I'm just saying it's a configuration ODOT's not afraid of. They've used before.
Or it's a lesson learned of not to do again. I don't know. I'm not trying to speak for ODOT.
I'm not going to put that in the motion, so we'll just
Okay.
let that lay.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we submit formal comments on the I-5 Rose Quarter environmental assessment, and the comments are, 1, the surface improvements are inconsistent with our TSP policy on people movement, impeding the flow of people walking, biking, and using transit. 2, the Hancock-Dixon connection as a primarily auto-oriented street with a 10% grade does not meet the north-northeast quadrant aspirations for opening a new connection to the Blanchard site. 3, we are skeptical of the claims that the freeway improvements will not induce additional demand, which would have very negative impacts on air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. And 4, we join with the other city advisory committees in calling for a full EIS and request specific consideration of a congestion pricing alternative.
I'll second it for purposes of moving it forward. Are there any discussion or questions?
Can you repeat the last one?
Sure. We join with other city advisory committees. I'm referring specifically to both the Bicycle Advisory Committee and the Pedestrian Advisory Committee that have asked for full EISs. We join with other city advisory committees in a call for a full EIS and request specific consideration of a congestion pricing alternative.
Any other questions or comments? I can tell you, Chris, I support 2 of your points. So I don't know if everybody's in support of all your points, in which case I don't need to go into it, but I'm not in support of all 4 of your points. And I'd almost have to have you quickly summarize all 4 just to put on the table. So
surface improvements are inconsistent with the TSP. Hancock-Dixon does not meet our aspirations.
So I do support the Hancock-Dixon.
We're skeptical of the claims of no induced demand and asking for a full EIS.
And I can support the full EIS. I guess those are the 2 points that I know enough about that I feel I could support. Go ahead, Teresa.
I'll just say that I would vote no because I don't feel like I have enough information to make those claims, so I could not support it.
So I suggest we try a vote, and I'll try a scaled back one if we don't get a majority.
Sure, that's fine. Any other, just real quick, any comments, questions? Nope. Okay, Julie?
Well, actually, yeah, I'm not sure I understand a couple of them myself, and I didn't realize we were going to be acting on this today, so I'd like to be better informed, frankly, and I don't know. The timing is such that...
We have till Monday.
Yeah, okay.
And this is, the proposal is a letter, right, that we're writing, kind of commenting on what we're hearing.
Okay. Well, on the other hand, I do have a lot of confidence in Chris's expertise and technical knowledge, so I didn't hear anything that said we were opposing the project outright, which I would not.
Tried that before.
I would not. I would
Not
not
do that
support
tonight.
that. Right.
Go ahead, Ben.
And I'm in a similar boat. I think I can agree with a couple of points, but I probably need a lot more persuasion on the other ones, probably a little more research on my part, especially the first point.
Do you have similar points than me or different points?
Similar points. I have concerns about the Hancock-Dixon, and it seems like a full EIS including the congestion pricing seems to make sense.
Okay.
I take out the Hancock-Dixon. Do I have a better chance of passing
We
here?
can run the vote both ways, and if you want to do it a second motion, that'd be fine for you.
I'd like to hear more about the first thing. I didn't quite get what you meant by.
So basically, the design as it is will delay cyclists and transit because we're making them cross each other to get through the project area. And our TSP says we should be prioritizing pedestrians, cyclists, and transit, and instead we're slowing down at least two of those. It's not consistent with our TSP.
And speeding up cars.
Right, we're speeding up cars, which we have put at the bottom of our TSP hierarchy.
Yeah. I think we're talking about seconds of delay. I just want to provide fully safe, separated crossings for pedestrians and cyclists.
Well, great. In EIS, you can calculate the hours.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're inconsistent with the TSP. And when we're replacing 5 bridges with state-of-the-art, proper width bicycle and pedestrian facilities and trees and
We have a whole analysis from our bicycle coordinator that was in the packet that talks about the delay points.
He also said that it was probably a benefit to the.
Yeah, I think a conclusion there was also that overall bike facilities are improved with the project.
I think that's
certainly some aspects of them are. I wouldn't argue with that.
Okay, Eli, did you want to add something? Or
I was most persuaded of the bullet points on the not aligning with the TSP because TSP takes into account the vehicular load also, and it seems like this significantly increases the way to get through that sector by a vehicle, which means up to, when we talk about the 25% most split for bicycling, I assume part of that doesn't increase the most split for cars, is that correct?
so is the his question is, with the increase in the mode split for bicycling, is there also then an assumed assumption of a decrease in vehicular split for cars?
I'm not sure.
Did I say that correctly,
The TSP
Eli?
mode share goals include a significant decrease in the SOV mode
Yes,
share
yes,
percentage.
yes.
Oh, Eli, hold on just a second.
Yeah, the project does provide much greater bicycle facilities and pedestrian facilities than it does new freeway capacity. So it is supportive of the TSP. It's actually in the TSP. It is in the regional transportation plan that also has similar goals to us. So I'm not sure a project that is in the TSP is exactly against the TSP. It is supporting the TSP goals and the Central City goals. We wrote findings on these, the safety goals and findings themselves. We're talking about the number 1 bicycle crash corridor in the city. So,
Eli, did you want to add anything to that, or is that?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I am a little concerned about that first point. What you're objecting to is that you think that it's it's preferring the car mode split, but you know, I've ridden my bike around there, and it's not a great bicycling area, except for maybe along Vancouver, and
Right, and that's exactly the traffic we're going to make you move up to Williams and cross paths with buses at a signalized intersection, which will slow down both you and the buses.
So what I was thinking is that you could change it so that we could say concerned about, want to make sure that the final design has the right mode split, or something like that, because I'm not seeing that right now. That
Okay.
Okay.
When we write the letter, I'm happy to include that idea.
So for the moment, we still have on the tables all 4 points. Any other discussion on that? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and just take a roll on that.
Okay.
Julie?
Bortolazzo.
As I said, I'm in favor of a couple, and for the other two, I probably need more time, so I would say no, but I'd be happy to go over one by one and perhaps vote individually on those.
Hauk.
We're going to wind up going to 2. I have a feeling. I'll say aye.
Okay.
Backrack said I had his proxy, but I won't vote for Jeff.
Doesn't work that way.
You can't. Larcel.
Yeah, I'll go for it.
Smith.
Yes.
Spivak.
Is this vote for the whole?
Yes.
All 4
All
points.
4.
Okay, I support, yes.
Okay. Was that yes?
Yes.
Okay. St. Martin.
No.
And Schultz.
No. So that passes.
Still passes.
Okay, thank you.
I would request, since we had some people who didn't vote for it, that we at least talk about the concern about a couple of the points in the letter.
Okay.
That's, I think, all we've got. Any other items for tonight? I'm not seeing anybody feeling like they need to get something said. Doesn't look like it. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Eli.